I was never one to back down from a challenge. When my friends suggested we hike the notorious Shadow Ridge Trail, I jumped at the opportunity. It was rumored to be one of the most beautiful trails in the region, with breathtaking views at the summit. However, it was also notorious for the number of hikers who had gone missing over the years. "Come on, it'll be fun," my friend Jake said, flashing his trademark grin. What's the worst that could happen? With that, we gathered our gear, water bottles, snacks, and a first aid kit. We set off early one Saturday morning, the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon. The fresh air and the smell of pine trees filled my lungs, invigorating me as we made our way to the trailhead. As we parked the car, I noticed a weathered sign that read, "Shadow Ridge Trail. Enter at your own risk." My stomach churned slightly, but I brushed it off as typical hiker caution. We snapped a few pictures, all smiles and excitement, before heading into the woods. The first couple of miles were easy, a gentle incline with wide paths. We laughed and joked as we walked, sharing stories of past hikes and adventures. The sounds of nature surrounded us, the rustling of leaves, the distant chirping of birds, and the occasional rustle of a critter in the underbrush. But as we ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere began to shift. The trees grew taller, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out much of the sunlight. The trail narrowed, and the sounds of wildlife faded into an unsettling silence. "Does it feel weird to anyone else?" I asked, glancing at my friends. Jake shrugged, a hint of unease in his smile. "Just the woods being spooky. It's all part of the adventure." I forced a laugh but couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The trail twisted and turned, and soon we found ourselves at a fork. A weathered map hung on a post, but it was barely legible. Which way should we go? Sarah, the quietest of our group, asked, her eyes darting between the paths. "Let's take the left path," Jake suggested, looking confident. "It leads to the summit." We followed Jake's lead, but with each step, the trees seemed to close in around us. The air felt thick, and the silence was almost deafening. My instincts screamed that we were being watched, but I tried to push the thought away. Hours passed, and we continued hiking, but the views we had anticipated never came. Instead, the trail twisted deeper into the woods, and the sunlight grew dimmer. My unease turned into anxiety, and I could sense that my friends felt it too. "Shouldn't we have reached the summit by now?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. "Maybe we took a wrong turn," I suggested, trying to remain calm. "Let's just keep going a little longer." But as we pressed on, the feeling of dread only intensified. It was as if the forest had come alive, the trees whispering secrets that we could not comprehend. I glanced back at the path we had taken, only to find it shrouded in shadows. Suddenly, we heard a rustling sound behind us. I froze, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Did you hear that?" Jake nodded, his expression shifting from playful to serious. "Yeah, let's keep moving." We hurried along the path, but the sound continued to follow us, growing closer. I could feel my heart racing, and a sense of panic washed over me. I turned to my friends, who looked just as frightened as I felt. "Let's get out of here," I urged, glancing back at the trail. But before we could react, a figure emerged from the trees. It was a man, wild-eyed and disheveled, his clothes torn and dirty. "Get out," he yelled, pointing down the trail. "You don't belong here." Confusion and fear coursed through me. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, stepping forward. "The forest is cursed," the man shouted, his voice breaking. People vanish. You need to leave now. His warning echoed in my mind, and I felt a chill run down my spine. We should listen to him, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Without waiting for a response, I turned and sprinted back down the trail, the sound of my friend's hurried footsteps behind me. The man's voice faded, but the rustling in the trees grew louder, as if the forest itself was angry. We ran for what felt like an eternity, the path twisting and turning, disorienting us. My lungs burned, and the weight of fear hung heavy in the air. It felt like the shadows were closing in, trying to ensnare us. Finally, we stumbled upon the fork we had encountered earlier. Desperate to escape, we chose the right path this time, hoping it would lead us back to safety. As we ran, the shadows danced around us, and the rustling continued, almost taunting us. I risked a glance over my shoulder, my heart dropping as I saw dark shapes flitting through the trees. Faster, I yelled, my voice hoarse. The trail grew steeper, the ground uneven, but we pushed on, the need to survive fueling our adrenaline. Just as I thought we might escape, I heard Sarah scream behind me. Sarah, I turned, dread pooling in my stomach. She was on the ground, struggling to get up, her ankle twisted at an unnatural angle. Leave me, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I can't move. We are not leaving you. Jake shouted, his voice filled with panic. Without thinking, I rushed back to her, helping her up. We can make it. Just hold on. With one of us supporting her on each side, we hobbled down the trail. The shadows seemed to thicken, and the rustling grew louder. It felt like the very forest was trying to swallow us whole. Just when I thought we might be overtaken, we stumbled into a clearing, a break in the trees that revealed the sky. I felt a surge of hope. There's the exit. We can make it. With renewed strength, we pushed forward, but the shadows lunged at us. I felt a cold grip wrap around my ankle, pulling me back. Run, I shouted, desperately trying to free myself. Jake and Sarah stumbled toward the opening, but I could see the terror on their faces as they hesitated. Keep going, I yelled, tears streaming down my cheeks. I'll be okay. The shadows dragged me deeper into the forest, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. The last thing I saw was the terrified expression on my friends' faces before the darkness closed in around me. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed, my body aching, and my mind foggy. The doctor informed me that I had been found by a search party after I had been missing for several days. Your friends made it out alive, the doctor said, and relief washed over me. But they were traumatized. They told us they heard you screaming, but the forest was too thick, and they couldn't get back to you in time. It took weeks for me to recover, but the memories of that day haunted me. I had returned home, but I was never truly free from the shadows that lurked in the woods. I found myself unable to shake the feeling that I had not escaped entirely. Months later, I discovered an article about Shadow Ridge Trail. It detailed the stories of hikers who had gone missing over the years, and I realized I was not the first to experience the forest's wrath. I decided to return to the trail, needing to confront my fears. The sign still stood, weathered but resolute. I followed the familiar path, each step sending chills down my spine. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining like grasping hands. As I reached the fork, a sense of deja vu washed over me. My heart raced as I recalled the figure's warning, but I pressed on. This time, I was determined to uncover the truth behind the shadows. The path twisted deeper into the woods, and I felt the same unsettling silence enveloping me. I reached the spot where I had encountered the wild-eyed man. I looked around, half expecting him to appear again, but the forest was still, save for the rustling of leaves. I knelt down, brushing my fingers over the ground, searching for answers. As I dug deeper into the earth, I felt something cold and metallic. My heart raced as I unearthed an old locket, its surface tarnished and covered in dirt. I opened it, revealing a faded photograph of a woman with a haunted expression. Behind her, a figure lurked, obscured by shadows. I shivered, realizing that I was not the first to come here seeking answers. Suddenly, the air grew thick, and a whisper echoed in my ears. "You should not have come back." I whipped around, panic rising within me. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The shadows began to swirl around me, and I felt a cold grip around my throat. I gasped for air as the darkness closed in, suffocating me. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices warning me to leave. With every ounce of strength, I fought against the grip, struggling to break free. "Let me go," I screamed, desperation fueling my will to survive. The mountains had always called to me, their peaks a siren song of adventure. I often hiked alone, finding solace in the solitude of nature. One summer, I decided to tackle Cedar Grove Trail, a path known for its stunning vistas and eerie legends. As I packed my backpack, I recalled the stories I had heard about the trail. People said it was haunted by the spirits of lost hikers, and that strange occurrences plagued those who ventured too far. But I brushed off the tales, confident in my abilities as an experienced hiker. Ghost stories are just that, stories, I told myself, eager to get started. I set off early one Saturday morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The air was crisp, and a light breeze rustled the leaves as I drove to the trailhead. Cedar Grove greeted me with its towering trees and winding paths, and I felt a thrill of anticipation. As I stepped onto the trail, I was enveloped by the scent of pine and damp earth. The first few miles were delightful, wildflowers dotted the landscape, and the sound of a babbling brook accompanied me as I hiked. My heart swelled with joy, the worries of everyday life fading away with each step. As I climbed higher, the trail became steeper and more challenging. My legs burned, but the beauty around me fueled my determination. I paused to catch my breath, glancing at my surroundings. The silence was profound, broken only by the rustle of leaves and distant bird calls. After a couple of hours, I reached a clearing. The view was breathtaking. A vast expanse of green valleys and distant mountains stretched before me. I took a moment to appreciate the scenery, snapping photos to capture the beauty. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shaking off the unease, I continued my hike. The path narrowed and twisted, leading me deeper into the woods. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining to form a dense canopy that dimmed the sunlight. The air grew cooler, and a chill crept up my spine. Just a little farther, I muttered to myself, pushing through the growing anxiety. I had read about the rumored ghost sightings on this trail, but I wouldn't let fear deter me. A couple of hours later, I found a perfect spot to rest. I sat on a rock, pulled out my water bottle, and enjoyed a quick snack. The tranquility of the moment was comforting. But as I looked around, I noticed a strange silence had settled in. Even the birds had stopped chirping. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the stillness. I turned sharply, heart racing. The sound seemed to come from the thicket nearby. "Hello," I called out, trying to sound brave. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. I took a deep breath and decided to investigate. Cautiously, I approached the brush, pushing aside branches as I searched for the source of the noise. As I neared the edge of the thicket, I stumbled upon an old, worn backpack half buried in the leaves. Confused, I knelt down to examine it. The fabric was faded, and it looked like it had been there for a long time. Curiosity gnawed at me as I opened the bag. Inside, I found a couple of empty water bottles, a half-eaten granola bar, and a frayed map of the trail. My heart sank as I noticed the map's edges were torn, and there were faded markings indicating various campsites and lookout points. But the last destination marked was off the trail, far away from the main path. "What happened to you?" I murmured, a chill creeping down my spine. I had heard stories of hikers who had vanished without a trace, but seeing evidence of that reality made it all too real. I felt an overwhelming urge to leave, but something compelled me to stay a little longer. Suddenly, the rustling sound returned, but this time it was closer. I whipped around, scanning the area for any signs of life. My gut instinct told me I was not alone. "Is anyone there?" I shouted again, a tremor in my voice. A shadow flickered at the edge of the clearing, but when I looked, nothing was there. I took a step back, heart pounding. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a soft whisper, almost too quiet to understand. "Help me," the voice was faint, but it sent a jolt of fear through my body. I glanced around, searching for the source, but there was only silence. Panic gripped me as I realized I needed to get out of there. I grabbed the backpack and quickly retraced my steps back to the main trail. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The woods felt alive, shadows shifting in the corners of my vision. After what felt like hours, I reached the fork in the trail. The path to the right led back to the parking lot, but the left path twisted deeper into the woods. The urge to explore it was strong, but I fought against it. "No," I told myself firmly. "You need to go back." I chose the right path and hurried down it, my heart racing as I heard faint whispers again. They echoed through the trees, indistinguishable but haunting. "Help me." My pace quickened, fear propelling me forward. I didn't dare look back. The shadows seemed to dance around me, taunting and teasing, as I pushed on. The whispers grew louder, and I felt a cold breeze brush against my neck. Just when I thought I would burst from the anxiety, I spotted the clearing ahead. My heart soared with hope as I raced toward it. But as I stepped into the open, I felt an icy grip wrap around my wrist. I spun around, eyes wide with terror. Standing before me was a woman, her eyes hollow and filled with despair. Her clothes were tattered, and her hair hung in matted strands around her face. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. I stumbled backward, panic flooding my senses. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out. "I was lost," she said, her voice trembling. "I need help to find my way home." I shook my head, my heart racing. "I can't help you. I need to leave." With that, I turned and sprinted back down the path. The whispers chased me, growing louder and more frantic. "Help me, help me." I pushed myself harder, the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears as I ran. The trees blurred past me, and the trail felt endless. My legs burned, and I felt tears streaming down my face, the fear and panic overwhelming me. Finally, I burst into the parking lot, gasping for breath. I rushed to my car, fumbling with the keys as I tried to unlock the door. I jumped inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I took a moment to collect myself, heart still racing as I glanced back at the woods. The shadows lingered at the edge of the tree line, and I felt a chill creep up my spine. "What just happened?" I murmured, shaking. I started the car and sped away, leaving the trail behind. The whispers faded, but the memory of the woman haunted me. Had she been real, or was she a figment of my imagination? The fear remained, settling deep within me like a dark shadow. As the days passed, I found it hard to shake the experience from my mind. I researched Cedar Grove Trail and discovered numerous accounts of hikers who had encountered similar apparitions. Some had vanished, never to be seen again, while others spoke of the woman in white who roamed the woods, seeking help. The more I learned, the more it troubled me. I couldn't understand how a simple hike could turn into a nightmare. I had always loved the mountains, but now they felt tainted, like a dark secret lurking behind the beauty. A week later, I decided to visit a local coffee shop that had become a hub for hikers and outdoor enthusiasts. As I sat sipping my drink, I overheard a group of hikers discussing their recent trip to Cedar Grove Trail. I swear, we heard voices. One of them said, his eyes wide with excitement. It was like someone was calling for help. Another chimed in, "Yeah, and we saw this woman. She was right by the trail, and it felt like she wanted us to follow her." My heart raced as I listened, unable to believe what I was hearing. Maybe it's a warning, I thought, anxiety creeping in. After they left, I approached the barista, a young woman with a friendly smile. "Hey, have you ever hiked Cedar Grove Trail?" She frowned slightly. "I went once, but I don't plan to go back. I heard some weird stories about it." "Like what?" I asked, intrigued. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "People say there are spirits in the woods. Hikers have reported seeing a woman who asks for help, but when you get close, she disappears. Some think she's trying to lead people to their doom." A chill ran down my spine. That's exactly what I experienced. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You saw her? Did she say anything?" I nodded, feeling my voice shake. "She asked for help. I ran away before I could find out more." "That is so creepy," she said, shuddering. "You were lucky to get out. Some people never come back." That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The image of the woman haunted my thoughts, her hollow eyes pleading for assistance. I knew I could not ignore it any longer. I had to go back to Cedar Grove Trail and find out what really happened. The next weekend, I prepared myself for the journey. I gathered my gear, determined to face whatever lay ahead. The trail would not defeat me. I had to uncover the truth. As I arrived at the trailhead, a sense of dread washed over me, but I pushed it aside. I needed answers. I set off on the path, retracing my steps, the memories flooding back with each footfall. When I reached the clearing where I had encountered the woman, I paused. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice steady. "I want to help." Silence enveloped me, and for a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. But then, a soft breeze rustled the leaves, and I heard it again, a whisper, faint but distinct. "Help me." I felt my heart race as I followed the sound, stepping deeper into the woods. I pushed through the brush, the whispers growing louder, guiding me as I navigated the undergrowth. Finally, I arrived at a small clearing, and there she was, the woman in white. Her form shimmered in the dappled light, and I felt an inexplicable pull toward her. "Please help me," she implored, her eyes filled with sorrow. "I am lost, and I cannot find my way home." "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I was hiking with friends," she began, her voice hauntingly soft. "We lost our way, and I wandered off. I tried to find my friends, but I fell, and now I cannot leave this place." I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. "How can I help you?" She pointed to a thicket of trees nearby. "If you can find my backpack, it will help me move on." I hesitated, fear gnawing at me. But I nodded, knowing I had to try. "I will find it. Just stay here." I rushed back to the spot where I had found the old backpack. Digging through the leaves, I searched desperately, praying I would uncover something that could help her. Finally, I found it, the same worn backpack, partially buried beneath the dirt. As I pulled it free, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. The whispers crescendoed around me, and I turned to find the woman standing close by, her expression hopeful. "Bring it to me," she urged, and I rushed back to the clearing. I handed her the backpack, and as she grasped it, a bright light enveloped her. The air shimmered, and I felt the presence of something powerful surrounding us. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing as the light grew brighter. "You have freed me." With a final smile, she vanished, leaving behind a trail of sparkles that faded into the air. I stood there, stunned, my heart racing from the encounter. I could hardly comprehend what had just happened. As the silence returned, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The oppressive energy that had lingered in the woods dissipated, leaving only the soothing sounds of nature. I slowly made my way back to the trailhead, the sun setting in the distance. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The haunting memories had transformed into something beautiful, a sense of closure for the woman who had once been lost. As I drove away from Cedar Grove Trail, I glanced in the rearview mirror, a smile tugging at my lips. The mountains had always held magic, but now I understood that magic came with its shadows. I was grateful for the experience, for the chance to help a lost soul find her way home. The summer sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows as I laced up my hiking boots. I had been waiting for this trip for weeks, eager to escape the clamor of city life and delve into the tranquility of nature. The destination, a secluded trail in the heart of the Black Mountains, renowned for its breathtaking views and untouched wilderness. As I packed my backpack, my mind drifted to Jenny Wells, a fellow hiker and friend who had disappeared last summer while exploring these very mountains. Her absence had cast a pall over our hiking group, the joyful adventures we once shared now tinged with a sense of unease. Though I had planned this trip as a means of healing, I couldn't shake the worrying that loomed in the back of my mind. The drive to the trailhead was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. The further I traveled, the more isolated I felt. Once I reached the parking area, I could hear the wind whispering through the trees, inviting me to step into the wild. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve, and set off down the trail. The first few miles were a familiar comfort. Birds chirped overhead, and the air was thick with the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. I welcomed the sounds of nature. They drowned out my worries about Jenny. Each step took me deeper into the forest, away from civilization and closer to my goal of reaching the summit before sunset. As I trekked on, The trail narrowed, flanked by thick underbrush on either side. The deeper I ventured, the more I felt the presence of the mountains surrounding me. There was something alive in this place, a pulsing energy that was both exhilarating and unsettling. About an hour into my hike, I stumbled upon an old, weathered sign. The paint was chipped and peeling, but I could still make out the words, "Lost Lake Trail." My heart raced with curiosity. I had read about Lost Lake, a hidden gem rumored to be breathtakingly beautiful, but I had never planned to take that route. Against my better judgment, I decided to explore it. Perhaps it was the thrill of adventure or the hope of discovering something new that spurred me on. I veered off the main path, following the winding trail that led toward the lake. As I walked, the woods thickened around me, and the air grew cooler. The sounds of the forest changed. The rustling leaves became softer, and the distant calls of birds faded into an eerie silence. I shivered, feeling the weight of the trees pressing down on me. "It's just the woods," I whispered to myself, forcing my mind to calm. After what felt like an eternity, I arrived at the lake. It was stunning. Its surface mirrored the sky above, framed by rugged cliffs and towering trees. I stood at the edge, captivated by the tranquility of the scene. But as I gazed into the still water, I felt a strange sensation creeping over me, a sense that I was not alone. Shaking off the feeling, I set my backpack down and took a moment to enjoy the scenery. I pulled out my water bottle and sat on a nearby rock, my eyes wandering over the peaceful lake. It was hard to believe that just last summer, Jenny had hiked these trails, blissfully unaware of the fate that awaited her. A chill ran down my spine as I thought about her disappearance. Friends had searched for her tirelessly, but no trace was ever found. The authorities had declared it a cold case, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked in these woods. I rose to my feet, brushing off the unsettling thoughts, and began to explore the area around the lake. As I wandered, I noticed strange markings on the trees, deep gashes, almost like claw marks. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I traced my fingers over the lines. What could have done this? I wondered aloud. Suddenly, I heard a rustling noise behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. My heart raced as I scanned the trees, every instinct screaming at me to leave. I decided it was time to head back, retracing my steps to the main trail. As I walked, I felt the atmosphere shift. The air grew heavy, and the whispers of the forest transformed into an oppressive silence. I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling that something was following me. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out any sounds around me. Just as I reached the main path, I spotted a figure in the distance. My heart stopped as I recognized the silhouette. It was a woman, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, standing still among the trees. "Jenny," I called out, hope flaring within me. But as I approached, the woman turned, and my heart plummeted. It was not Jenny, but a stranger, a ghostly figure dressed in a faded hiking outfit. Her eyes were hollow, and her expression was one of profound sorrow. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. Fear gripped me, and I stumbled back. "Who are you?" I gasped, instinctively searching for an escape. "I cannot leave this place," she said, her voice echoing in the silence. "You must help me find my way." The air turned icy, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I took a step back, but she reached out toward me, her hand trembling. "You must find what was lost." "What do you mean?" I stammered, my heart racing. "What happened to you?" "I was lost," she said, her voice growing faint. The mountains keep their secrets. You must uncover the truth. With that, she vanished into the trees, leaving me standing there, frozen in fear. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Was she another lost hiker? Like Jenny, the thought sent chills down my spine. I turned and ran, desperate to get back to the safety of my car. The trail twisted and turned, but I kept moving, fueled by adrenaline. I could feel the weight of the woods closing in around me, shadows shifting in the corners of my vision. Finally, I burst out of the trees and into the parking area, gasping for breath. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the mountains. I felt a mix of relief and dread wash over me as I stumbled toward my car. Once inside, I locked the doors and took a moment to collect myself. The encounter with the woman replayed in my mind. I had to find out more about the dark history of these mountains and what had happened to Jenny. After a restless night, I returned to the city determined to dig deeper. I spent hours at the library, poring over newspaper articles and local legends. The stories I uncovered were chilling, tales of hikers who had disappeared, their names etched into the history of the Black Mountains. As I read, I discovered that many had reported seeing the same ghostly figure, a woman dressed in hiking gear, who would appear to those who wandered too close to Lost Lake. Some believed she was a warning, while others thought she was a lost soul, trapped in the forest for eternity. Weeks passed, and I could not shake the feeling that I needed to return to Cedar Grove. I was drawn to the mountains, compelled to uncover the truth of what happened to Jenny. I gathered my gear once more and drove back to the trailhead, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear. This time, I was not afraid. I had a purpose. I set out down the main trail, determined to reach Lost Lake and confront the specter that haunted me. As I walked, I focused on Jenny, the memories of our time together flooding my mind. When I reached the lake, I felt a chill run through the air. The once peaceful waters now seemed ominous, reflecting the dark clouds that gathered overhead. I stood at the edge calling out, "If you can hear me, I want to help." Silence answered. I felt a wave of despair wash over me, but I refused to give up. "Jenny, if you are here, please show me a sign." Moments passed, and just as I began to lose hope, the water rippled, and I saw her, the ghostly figure of the woman. This time, her expression was more defined, a mix of sorrow and urgency etched across her face. "Find the truth," she urged, her voice clearer than before. "The mountains keep secrets that must be revealed. I will," I promised, my voice steady. "I will find out what happened to you." With a nod, she faded away, leaving me with a sense of purpose. I turned back toward the woods, ready to explore the area around Lost Lake. As I delved deeper into the forest, I stumbled upon an old campsite, remnants of a fire pit and scattered belongings. My heart raced as I recognized the gear, a worn backpack, a faded jacket, and a photograph of Jenny smiling at the camera. I knelt down, shaking as I picked up the photograph. It was taken just a week before she vanished. How did this end up here? I wondered aloud. The air felt charged, as if the woods were watching me. I searched the area, desperately hoping to find more clues. Suddenly, I spotted something shiny half buried in the dirt. I dug it out, a silver bracelet engraved with the initials JW. My heart dropped as I realized it was Jenny's. The world spun around me as the reality of what I had discovered sank in. I stumbled back, fighting back tears. "Oh, Jenny, what happened to you?" As I sat there, a gust of wind blew through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter. I looked up, and for a brief moment, I could see her, standing just beyond the trees, smiling at me. In that instant, I felt a connection, a thread tying us together across time and space. I understood then that she was not lost. She was waiting for someone to remember her, to tell her story. I gathered the items I had found, the photograph and the bracelet, and made my way back to the trail. With each step, I felt lighter, as if the weight of the forest was lifting. The mountains were not just a backdrop, they were part of Jenny's story, and I was determined to share it. Back at the trailhead, I took one last look at the mountains, a mixture of sadness and hope swelling in my chest. I knew this was not the end. I would return to honor Jenny's memory and keep her spirit alive. That night, I sat down to write. The words flowed from my pen, telling the story of Jenny Wells and her last hike. I wanted the world to know that she had existed, that her laughter once echoed through the trees, and that her spirit still roamed the mountains she loved. The wind whistled through the trees, a haunting melody that seemed to echo through the stillness of the forest. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp mountain air as I stood at the trailhead of Maple Ridge Trail. It was early morning, and the sun had barely risen, casting a soft glow over the landscape. This was my favorite hiking spot, a place where I could escape the chaos of life and reconnect with nature. Today was special. I had invited my younger sister Lily to join me. Ever since our parents had passed away, I had taken it upon myself to look after her. She was eager to explore the great outdoors, but I worried about her adventurous spirit. The mountains had a way of swallowing people whole, and I wanted to ensure that Lily remained safe. "Are you ready?" I called out, glancing back at her as she fumbled with her backpack. "Just a second," she replied, her voice filled with excitement. She finally managed to zip up her bag and trotted over to me, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. The trail started off easy, winding gently through the trees. We chatted about our plans for the summer and laughed at old family memories as we walked. Lily was my sunshine. She had a way of making everything feel lighter, and I cherished these moments we spent together. After about an hour of hiking, we reached the first lookout point. The view was breathtaking. The valley sprawled out beneath us, a patchwork of greens and browns, dotted with wild flowers. We took a moment to soak it all in, the beauty of nature grounding us amidst our grief. "Can we go further?" Lily asked, her eyes filled with determination. "I want to see the waterfall." I hesitated. The waterfall was beautiful, but it was a tougher hike, and the sun was beginning to rise higher in the sky. "It might be a bit challenging," I warned, "but if you're up for it, let's go." "Definitely," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. We pressed on, and soon the trail became steeper, the terrain rocky and uneven. I noticed Lily's pace quickening, her youthful energy fueling her excitement. I followed closely behind, keeping an eye on her. The deeper we ventured into the woods, the more the trees began to close in around us, their towering forms creating a canopy that blocked out the sun. As we hiked, the air grew cooler, and an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just my overprotective instincts kicking in. We continued climbing, until we finally heard the distant sound of rushing water. "There it is," Lily shouted, racing ahead. I hurried after her, my heart pounding as we reached the waterfall. The sight was magnificent, The water cascaded down the rocks, sparkling in the sunlight. It was a moment of pure joy, and I watched as Lily skipped closer to the edge, captivated by the beauty. "Be careful," I called, my voice tinged with worrying. Lily turned back to me, beaming. "It's amazing. You have to come see it." I approached cautiously, my feet slipping slightly on the wet rocks. The roar of the water drowned out our voices, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the thrill of the moment. Suddenly, I noticed something strange. In the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement behind the trees. I turned my head sharply, but nothing was there. I brushed it off as a trick of the light, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. "Hey, are you okay?" Lily asked, concern in her voice. "Yeah, I just thought I saw something," I replied, shaking my head to clear my thoughts. "Let's take a break and enjoy the view." We sat on a rock, eating our snacks and watching the waterfall. It was a peaceful moment, one I wished could last forever. But as we rested, the feeling of unease returned. I felt as if we were being watched, a sensation that crawled along my skin. I decided to shake it off and focus on Lily. "Let's head back soon," I suggested, trying to keep my voice light. "We should get back before it gets too dark." "Can we explore a little more?" Lily begged, her eyes pleading. I hesitated, glancing back toward the trees where I had seen the movement earlier. "Just a quick look," I conceded. "But we need to be careful." We wandered a bit further along the trail, stepping cautiously over the rocks. The sounds of the waterfall faded into the background, and an eerie silence enveloped us. As we ventured deeper, the trees thickened, their branches intertwining to create a dense wall of foliage. "Do you think we are far from the trail?" Lily asked, glancing around. I stopped to check my phone for reception, but there was none. "It's hard to say," I admitted. "We should probably turn back soon." Just as I spoke, I heard a rustling noise behind us. My heart raced as I turned to see a dark figure darting between the trees. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What?" Lily looked confused. "There was something back there," I said, my instincts kicking in. "We should go back now." I grabbed her hand and started leading her back the way we had come. The rustling noise followed us, growing louder as we hurried down the trail. I could feel my pulse quickening, anxiety flooding my senses. "Is it an animal?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, trying to remain calm. "But let's keep moving." We reached the edge of the waterfall again, and I stopped to catch my breath. The air was thick with tension, and I scanned the trees, half expecting to see the figure emerge. Nothing. "Maybe it was just a deer or something," I said, attempting to reassure myself as much as Lily. "Yeah, maybe," she said, though I could hear the doubt in her voice. I took a deep breath, deciding to focus on getting us back to the main trail. We started back toward the path, but as we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The sound of rustling leaves echoed behind us, a constant reminder that we were not alone. "Do you think we are lost?" Lily asked, her voice small. "No, we just need to keep going," I replied, trying to instill confidence. "Just a little further." But as we navigated the path, the trees began to close in again, twisting and turning as if they were shifting. It felt as though the forest was alive, reshaping itself to confuse us. I glanced at my phone again, still no signal. We finally made it back to the main trail, and relief washed over me. "We are safe now," I assured Lily. But as we started down the path, I felt a chill creep up my spine. A shadow flitted past us in the corner of my vision. I turned quickly, but once again, nothing was there. "We need to move faster," I said, my voice urgent. As we quickened our pace, the rustling sounds intensified, growing nearer with each step. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a dark silhouette, tall and ominous, standing just outside the tree line. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her forward. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We sprinted down the trail, the shadows pursuing us. I could hear the twigs snapping behind us, the sound echoing like footsteps. My mind raced, desperately trying to find a way to escape. The world around us became a blur as we ran, the trees whipping by in a haze of green. After what felt like an eternity, we burst into the clearing near the parking lot. I turned back, breathless, but the figure was gone. The silence that followed was deafening, and I could hardly catch my breath. "What was that?" Lily gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I replied, trying to calm my racing heart. "But we need to get to the car, now." We rushed to the parking lot, fumbling for our keys. I glanced over my shoulder one last time, scanning the trees for any sign of the shadowy figure. But all I saw was the forest, dark and foreboding. Once we were inside the car, I locked the doors and took a moment to gather my thoughts. "I am so sorry, Lily," I said, feeling the weight of guilt settle over me. "I shouldn't have let us go so far off the trail." "It is okay," she said, her voice trembling. "But what was that? Was it really following us?" "I do not know," I admitted, "but we are safe now." I started the car, eager to leave the mountain behind. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching us. I turned one last time, but there was nothing but the empty forest, the trees swaying gently in the wind. The drive home was filled with silence. I could feel Lily's anxiety lingering in the air, and I wanted nothing more than to protect her from the fear that had gripped us both. Once we arrived home, I tried to ease her worries. "It was probably just a deer or something," I reassured her. "There is nothing to be afraid of now." But deep down, I knew that what we had encountered in the woods was far from ordinary. As I tucked her into bed that night, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that settled in my chest. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rustling outside. Weeks passed, and the memory of that day lingered in my mind like a haunting melody. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started to do some research about the area, hoping to find an explanation. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Stories of hikers disappearing in the woods, unexplained figures lurking in the shadows, and local legends surrounding the Maple Ridge Trail. They called it a cursed trail, a place where lost souls roamed, unable to find their way home. As the days turned into weeks, Lily and I slowly resumed our lives, but the fear lingered. We avoided the forest, sticking to the safety of our home. But one evening, while cleaning the attic, I found an old photo album. As I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon a picture of our family hiking. In the background, a shadowy figure stood among the trees, almost blending in. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar outline, a chilling reminder of that day. I turned the page, but the figure seemed to follow me, lurking just out of sight in every photo. Panic set in, and I slammed the album shut. "Lily," I called, my voice strained. "You need to see this." She rushed up the stairs, concern etched on her face. I opened the album to show her the picture. "Do you see it?" I asked, my voice trembling. She stared at the photograph, confusion evident. "Is that?" "I think it is the same figure from the woods," I whispered. Just then, a loud thud echoed from the attic, causing us both to jump. "What was that?" Lily cried, her eyes wide with fear. "I do not know," I replied, my heart pounding. "Stay close to me." We moved cautiously towards the sound, our breaths shallow. As we reached the edge of the attic, I peered into the darkness, my heart racing. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, and I stumbled back, screaming. But as the figure stepped into the light, I realized it was just a cardboard cutout of a hiker from an old camping trip. We both laughed nervously, the tension breaking momentarily. "It scared me," I admitted, still shaken. Lily giggled, but her laughter faded when she noticed something in the corner of the attic. A dusty backpack lay abandoned, one I did not recognize. "Whose is this?" she asked, pointing to it. I approached the backpack, my heart racing once more. As I opened it, a chill ran down my spine. Inside was a collection of maps, camping gear, and an old, tattered journal. I pulled out the journal, flipping through its pages. It was filled with notes, sketches, and stories from a hiker who had disappeared years ago. As I read, my heart sank. The last entry spoke of a shadow that followed the writer, a constant presence lurking just out of sight. "This is terrifying," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. "We need to get rid of this," I said, feeling the weight of dread settle over me. But as I reached to put the journal back in the backpack, a gust of wind rushed through the attic, slamming the window shut. We both jumped, our hearts racing. "What is happening?" Lily cried. "I do not know," I replied, my voice shaky. "But I think we need to leave this place." We hurried back downstairs, leaving the backpack behind. As the days turned into nights, the feeling of being watched returned, creeping into our dreams and filling our thoughts. One night, I awoke to a soft whisper, the sound chilling me to the bone. "Help me," it seemed to say. I bolted upright, glancing at Lily, who was fast asleep. I shook her gently, trying to wake her. "Lily, did you hear that?" "What?" she mumbled, barely opening her eyes. "Someone is calling for help," I insisted, my heart pounding. But just as I said it, the whisper faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I decided to confront the truth. "We have to go back," I told Lily, determination in my voice. "We need to face whatever it is that is haunting us." "What? Are you serious?" she replied, her voice trembling. "Yes," I said firmly. "We need closure. We cannot live in fear." Reluctantly, she agreed, and we made our way back to Maple Ridge Trail. The drive was tense, the memories flooding back as we approached the trailhead. When we arrived, the forest felt different. It was as if the trees were watching us, their branches swaying in a silent greeting. We stepped onto the trail, the sounds of nature filling the air, but I could still feel the weight of dread pressing down on me. As we hiked back to the waterfall, I noticed the shadows seemed to grow longer, twisting into shapes that played tricks on my mind. I turned to Lily. "We are almost there," I said, trying to keep her spirits up. But as we reached the waterfall, something was off. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that set my teeth on edge. I could feel the whisper returning, echoing through the trees. "Help me," it beckoned again, clearer this time. "Did you hear that?" I gasped, looking at Lily. She nodded, fear evident in her eyes. "What is happening?" "I do not know," I admitted, my heart racing. "But we need to follow the voice." We stepped away from the waterfall, guided by the sound that seemed to draw us deeper into the woods. The path twisted and turned, branches clawing at us like skeletal fingers. Finally, We reached a clearing. In the center was a small cabin, half hidden by the underbrush. The door creaked open, revealing darkness within. "Should we go in?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I do not know," I replied, hesitating. As we stood at the threshold, the whisper grew louder, almost frantic. "Help me," it cried. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, Lily following closely behind. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with dust. Old furniture lay scattered, forgotten and decayed. On the table was a collection of photographs, and my heart dropped as I recognized the faces. They were hikers who had gone missing over the years, their smiling faces now haunting reminders of the forest's darkness. But one photograph stood out, a young woman with bright eyes, her smile infectious. I felt an inexplicable connection to her, as if she were reaching out from the past. "What is this place?" Lily asked, her voice shaking. "I do not know," I replied, feeling the weight of despair wash over me. Just then, a cold gust of wind swept through the cabin, sending shivers down my spine. The door slammed shut, trapping us inside. "Let us get out," I shouted, panic rising within me. But as we rushed to the door, the whisper transformed into a desperate scream. "Help me, help me." The walls seemed to close in, the shadows twisting and reaching for us. I felt an icy grip on my heart, a feeling of hopelessness settling. "Run," I screamed, grabbing Lily's hand. We darted through the cabin, searching for a way out. Just as we reached the back door, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the woman from the photograph, her eyes wide with terror. "Please, you must help me," she pleaded, her voice echoing with desperation. I could not comprehend what was happening. "How?" I cried, feeling the weight of her gaze. "What? Are you serious?" she replied, her voice trembling. "Yes," I said firmly. "We need closure. We cannot live in fear." Reluctantly, she agreed, and we made our way back to Maple Ridge Trail. The drive was tense, the memories flooding back as we approached the trailhead. When we arrived, the forest felt different. It was as if the trees were watching us, their branches swaying in a silent greeting. We stepped onto the trail, the sounds of nature filling the air, but I could still feel the weight of dread pressing down on me. As we hiked back to the waterfall, I noticed the shadows seemed to grow longer, twisting into shapes that played tricks on my mind. I turned to Lily. "We are almost there," I said, trying to keep her spirits up. But as we reached the waterfall, something was off. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that set my teeth on edge. I could feel the whisper returning, echoing through the trees. "Help me," it beckoned again, clearer this time. "Did you hear that?" I gasped, looking at Lily. She nodded, fear evident in her eyes. "What is happening?" "I do not know," I admitted, my heart racing. "But we need to follow the voice." We stepped away from the waterfall, guided by the sound that seemed to draw us deeper into the woods. The path twisted and turned, branches clawing at us like skeletal fingers. Finally, we reached a clearing. In the center was a small cabin, half hidden by the underbrush. The door creaked open, revealing darkness within. "Should we go in?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I do not know," I replied, hesitating. As we stood at the threshold, the whisper grew louder, almost frantic. "Help me," it cried. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, Lily following closely behind. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with dust. Old furniture lay scattered, forgotten and decayed. On the table was a collection of photographs, and my heart dropped as I recognized the faces. They were hikers who had gone missing over the years, their smiling faces now haunting reminders of the forest's darkness. But one photograph stood out, a young woman with bright eyes, her smile infectious. I felt an inexplicable connection to her, as if she were reaching out from the past. "What is this place?" Lily asked, her voice shaking. "I do not know," I replied, feeling the weight of despair wash over me. Just then, a cold gust of wind swept through the cabin, sending shivers down my spine. The door slammed shut, trapping us inside. "Let us get out," I shouted, panic rising within me. But as we rushed to the door, the whisper transformed into a desperate scream. "Help me! Help me!" The walls seemed to close in, the shadows twisting and reaching for us. I felt an icy grip on my heart, a feeling of hopelessness settling. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Lily's hand. We darted through the cabin, searching for a way out. Just as we reached the back door, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the woman from the photograph, her eyes wide with terror. "Please, you must help me," she pleaded, her voice echoing with desperation. I could not comprehend what was happening. "How?" I cried, feeling the weight of her gaze. "Release me," she whispered, reaching out. "You must find my body. It is buried in the woods." My heart raced as I realized the truth. This was not just a haunting, it was a cry for help. "Where?" I asked, desperation lacing my voice. "Follow the path," she said, her voice fading. "You must hurry." Just then, the cabin began to shake, the walls groaning under pressure. We rushed out the back door, barely escaping as the structure crumbled behind us. "We need to find her," I told Lily, determination surging through me. With a newfound purpose, we raced back to the trail, following the sound of the whisper that had led us here. We moved quickly, the trees closing in around us, but I felt an urgency pushing me forward. After what felt like an eternity of running, we reached a small clearing marked by a large rock. My heart raced as I looked around. "Is this it?" I wondered aloud. "Yes, I think so," Lily replied, scanning the area. I began searching the ground, feeling for anything that might indicate a burial site. The whisper returned, guiding me to a specific spot beneath a fallen tree. We cleared the leaves and dirt, and my heart sank as I uncovered a small, weathered box. Inside was a necklace, and I could feel the weight of sadness enveloping me. "We found her," I whispered, tears brimming in my eyes. As I held the necklace, the air around us shifted. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the trees. "Thank you," a soft voice said, and I felt a warmth envelop me. Suddenly, the shadows began to retreat, the pressure lifting. I looked at Lily, relief flooding through us both. "We did it," I said, a smile breaking through my tears. As we made our way back, the forest felt different. The whispers faded, replaced by the peaceful sounds of nature. The shadows no longer felt threatening. Instead, they seemed to welcome us back. That night, as we lay in bed, I reflected on our journey. The woods that had once filled me with dread now felt like a sanctuary. We had faced our fears, confronted the darkness, and brought light back into a haunted place. In the days that followed, we returned to the Maple Ridge Trail often, hiking with newfound appreciation for the beauty around us. The stories of lost hikers no longer haunted my thoughts. Instead, they became tales of hope and healing. And as for the young woman, I knew she had finally found peace, her spirit released from the shadows that had held her captive for so long. We had listened to her plea for help and, in doing so, transformed our own lives. It was a crisp autumn day when I decided to take my usual hiking route in the Northern Pines National Forest. The air was refreshing, the leaves were a vibrant mix of reds, oranges, and yellows, and the sun peeked through the branches overhead, casting dappled shadows on the ground. I felt an inexplicable urge to hit the trail that had become a second home to me over the years. I arrived at the trailhead, the familiar wooden sign standing tall, its paint chipped but still legible. I tightened the straps of my backpack and began my journey, the crunch of leaves beneath my boots echoing in the quiet forest. This trail had always offered me solace, a break from the chaos of life. As I ventured deeper into the woods, I was reminded of past hikes, the time I'd spotted a family of deer grazing peacefully, or the breathtaking view from the summit that made the trek worthwhile. Today, however, felt different. The vibrant colors surrounding me seemed muted, and a peculiar silence enveloped the forest, almost as if the woods were holding its breath. I dismissed the feeling, attributing it to my imagination. Maybe I was just tired. A few hours passed, and I reached the halfway point, a small clearing with a rocky outcrop where I usually stopped to rest. I took a moment to catch my breath and enjoy a granola bar, gazing out at the horizon. The view was breathtaking, the valley stretching out below me in a patchwork of colors. Suddenly, I noticed a faint sound, like soft whispers carried on the wind. I stood up, straining to hear. The whispers grew louder, sounding almost urgent. My heart raced as I looked around, but there was no one in sight. Dismissing it as an echo of the forest, I decided to press on, eager to reach my destination. As I continued hiking, the path began to twist and turn, and I noticed a few branches had fallen across the trail. It was unusual. I had never seen the trail in such disarray. I carefully stepped over the debris, the whispers still lingering at the edge of my consciousness. Each step felt heavier, the air thick with an unknown tension. Minutes later, I reached a junction where the trail split into two. One path led to the summit, while the other descended into a secluded valley I had never explored. Curiosity piqued, I decided to take the unmarked path, convinced it would lead to new adventures. As I walked, the atmosphere shifted, the whispers intensified, morphing into indistinct murmurs. It was as if the forest was alive, trying to communicate something to me. I paused for a moment, my heart racing. Is anyone there? I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. Silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I continued walking, but unease crept in. The trail narrowed, becoming overgrown with thorns and brambles, obscuring my path. Each step felt more treacherous than the last, the trees closing in around me. The whispers grew clearer now, forming a word I could almost recognize. Help! My heart pounded in my chest. Was I imagining this? I hesitated, but felt compelled to continue. Who needs help? I shouted, hoping for a response, but there was nothing but the rustling leaves. The path twisted again, and I found myself in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. A tattered sign lay on the ground, half buried in leaves. I approached it and brushed off the dirt. It read, "Danger. Proceed with caution." A chill ran down my spine. I turned to retrace my steps, but the trail behind me had vanished. Panic surged through me as I realized I was truly lost. No, no, no. I muttered to myself, desperately searching for a familiar landmark. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder this time. "Help us," they pleaded, echoing in the clearing. I felt an icy grip on my heart, the air around me thickening. "Who are you?" I shouted into the emptiness, my voice trembling. The shadows deepened as I stood frozen, fear clawing at my mind. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something move, a figure darting between the trees. My instincts kicked in, and I started running, my heart racing as I chased after it. "Wait, please," I called, hoping to catch up. The figure slipped further into the woods, and I pushed myself harder, branches scratching at my arms as I fought through the underbrush. But the deeper I went, the more disoriented I became. Finally, I stumbled into another clearing, breathless and frantic. To my horror, I discovered what appeared to be remnants of an old campsite, a faded tent, scattered gear, and rusted cooking utensils. There was something unsettling about it, like it had been abandoned in a hurry. The whispers intensified again, and I felt a cold breeze rush past me. "Help us!" they cried, now desperate and haunting. I looked around, my mind racing. The echoes seemed to come from the shadows, urging me to look closer. I approached the tent, my pulse racing. As I unzipped the entrance, I felt a surge of dread. Inside lay a dusty backpack, filled with maps and hiking gear. But what caught my attention was a small, old photograph lying at the bottom. I picked it up, and my blood ran cold. It depicted a group of hikers, all smiling and carefree. One face stood out, a young woman with striking features, her eyes filled with joy. I squinted, and the recognition hit me like a punch to the gut. She was missing from the news reports I had seen months ago. Reports of hikers who had vanished without a trace. "Please help us," the whispers echoed again, growing louder, as if the forest itself was urging me to do something. I stepped back, overwhelmed by the realization that I was not alone in this forest. They were lost souls, trapped in a place between the living and the dead, seeking closure. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, feeling tears prick at my eyes. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, extinguishing the fading light. Shadows twisted and writhed, revealing glimpses of the hikers from the photograph, their faces filled with sorrow. "You must find us," they whispered, their voices echoing through the trees. "We cannot rest." Fear surged through me as I realized the gravity of my situation. I needed to find out what had happened to these hikers and help them find peace. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. "Where are you?" I called out into the darkness. The shadows flickered, and I felt an invisible pull toward the depths of the forest. Taking a leap of faith, I followed the force guiding me forward, determined to uncover the truth behind their disappearance. As I ventured deeper, the path became more treacherous, thick with roots and underbrush. The whispers grew louder, leading me through the darkness. I felt like I was stepping into another world, one filled with sorrow and longing. Eventually, I arrived at a small pond, its surface reflecting the moonlight. The whispers became a chorus of voices, urging me to look closely. I crouched beside the water, and as I gazed into its depths, visions began to swirl before my eyes, images of the hikers, their laughter echoing in the air. But then the visions turned dark. I saw them arguing, fear flashing across their faces as they realized they were lost. I watched as panic set in, their once happy camaraderie shattered by the looming threat of the forest. Suddenly, everything went black, and the echoes faded. "Help us!" they cried, their voices now desperate. I looked around frantically. "What do you need me to do?" I shouted into the void. The moonlight shimmered across the pond, and I noticed something glimmering beneath the surface. I reached down, my fingers brushing against something solid, a necklace, the same one worn by the woman from the photograph. My heart raced as I pulled it free, and the moment I did, the forest fell silent. A sudden warmth enveloped me, the shadows retreating as the whispers faded. "Thank you," a soft voice echoed, and I felt a sense of peace wash over the clearing. The air shifted again, and the spirits of the hikers emerged, their faces serene and grateful. "You have freed us," they whispered in unison. "Thank you for listening." I could hardly breathe as I watched them fade into the moonlight, their expressions filled with relief. The weight of their sorrow lifted, and I felt an overwhelming sense of calm settle over the forest. Suddenly, the path that had once been lost reappeared before me, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. I took a deep breath, filled with gratitude for the journey I had just undertaken. With newfound determination, I made my way back, the whispers now replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant sounds of the forest coming to life. As I retraced my steps, I realized that the forest, which had once felt so foreboding, was now filled with a sense of harmony. The lost souls had found their peace, and in doing so, they had gifted me with a deeper understanding of the fragility of life. When I finally emerged from the trees, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the horizon. I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I had helped those who had been lost in the shadows. I promised myself to return to the forest, not in fear but in gratitude, honoring the memories of those who had walked its trails before me. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the events of the day. The hiking trails were not merely paths through the woods. They were stories waiting to be uncovered, echoes of lives once lived. And I had become a part of that story, forever changed by the encounter in the forest.